Hey, what's up? It's E. Shea Smith here, former IBF junior middleweight champion of the world. Make sure you guys subscribe to the Sporting Icons. Cheers.
Okay, so a lot of you are asking me my thoughts on Floyd Mayweather, saying how Tank Davis and these kind of guys are only interested in making in-house fights. In fact, we'll go straight into Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s statement. Of course, he made this statement right after Gervonta Davies defeated Mario Barrios for the WBA regular 140-pound title. This is what Floyd Mayweather had to say. We keep everything in-house. Mayweather Promotions and the PBC. We're not going to go away and make another company great. We've got plenty at 130 to 140 pounds. We're going to continue to fight the fights that we've got to fight. Floyd Mayweather's statement. So all Floyd Mayweather is doing here is telling you what we already knew. If you're a PBC fighter, they don't want you going outside of the stable. Okay, and as much as PBC fighters say how they're their own boss, they're their own managers, they're their own promoters, and this, that, and the other, yet they always tend to hide behind the skirts of Al Heyman, right? Go see Al Heyman, go see Al Heyman if you want to make a fight. They hide behind the banner, even though apparently they can go to any network that they choose, but they don't, or at least for the most part. Tank Davis is no exception. I mean, why do you think the fights with, say, a Devin Haney hasn't happened, or a Lomachenko, and that hasn't happened? Tevin Farmer and fights like that, because they don't want Tank Davis going outside of the stable. In fact, they are so hell-bent on making Tank Davis a pay-per-view fighter that people will pay it. People, I mean, I don't know exactly what the viewing figures were for the pay-per-view for Gervonta Tank Davis against Mario Barrios, but if there's enough people willing to click that button at $85, I can't believe that you guys have to pay $85. That is so much money. But hey, at the end of the day, if you're willing to click that button, and if enough of you do it, they will put on fights on pay-per-view. The PBC platform is pretty much a pay-per-view platform now. That's pretty much what it is. Anything that's even remotely a little bit interesting is pay-per-view. I mean, for me, I thought that with everybody coming out of the pandemic, hopefully at least coming out of it, these kind of companies will be a little bit more lenient, because obviously a lot of people have lost their jobs and they've lost loved ones or had reduced hours. Things aren't quite the same. Maybe we're heading into a global recession, we don't know. But ultimately, to keep on putting everything on pay-per-view is disgusting, if we're being brutally honest. Now, Leonard Ellerby, of course, he's like Floyd Mayweather's nutsack carrier. He's kind of, again, a guy who will push the narrative of PBC fighters fighting in-house fights. Of course, when you think of, say, Tank Davis, they're already billing him as a multi-weight world champion. He's not. He's a regular champion. Okay, he's not really world champion. The world champion at 140 is the undisputed champion in Josh Taylor. And you had the likes of, say, Leonard Ellerby saying how, but Josh Taylor, he doesn't sell enough tickets, people don't know him enough, and whatever else. But yet, was about 1.5 million people watched him fight Jose Ramirez for the undisputed world titles on ESPN, but people don't know who he is. Well, if over 1.5 million homes in the United States of America watched that, well, 1.5 million people know who he is. Let alone people here in the UK and especially Scotland. So with him saying that is him saying Tank Davis is ducking Josh Taylor. That's the truth of it, isn't it? He's ducking him. What else could you possibly call it? There's nothing else to possibly call it. Because to say that Josh Taylor isn't a good enough name for a Tank Davis, what Mario Barrios is? Come on, stop it now. That's just pure ridiculous is what that is. It's ducking. That's the only way to possibly put it. Now, Tank Davis is a phenomenal fighter. Tank Davis is one of the most naturally gifted fighters out there. He's a little lazy, that's for sure. I think if he committed himself a little bit more, he wouldn't have to be fighting at 140 pound. He'd be okay at still fighting at, say, 130, maybe 135 at a push. But I think that Tank Davis, of course, he's like hanging around the likes of Adrian Broner, who in my opinion, of course, he was a fantastic fighter back in his time, which is quite unusual for me to say, as Adrian Broner isn't exactly an old man now. But I think Broner is a bit of a bad influence on Tank Davis. I really do. But to say that Tank Davis can't fight a Josh Taylor, why? Because he's on another network. That's why, on ESPN and Top Rank. That's why you won't probably see Tank Davies fight a Lomachenko, fight a Teofimo Lopez or a Devin Haney or a Ryan Garcia. In fact, even before with Tevin Farmer. And I don't think that this is down to Tank Davies not wanting these fights. Floyd Mayweather, Leonard Ellerbe, Al Heyman are frightened to death of Tank Davies fighting any of these top guys and him getting beat, which is kind of weird in some ways because Tank Davies has the ability to possibly beat all of these. Would you make him the favourite in all of them? No, of course not. But he's certainly got the ability and he's got the punching power on that as well. He really does. But for them to be keeping in-house fights, Floyd Mayweather is just confirming what we already knew. These fighters can say how they're free agents and whatever else. Well, I mean, never before in my life have I heard someone like Errol Spence Jr. talking about the wrong side of the street. When you are a free agent, it's what these people do. But at the end of the day, if the boxing fans are going to allow them to continue to do this, much like the PBC fanboys, they get in bed with this kind of idea. But I think a lot of this is heading towards the PBC world titles. If you cast your minds back to before lockdown, you've got like the chief executive or whoever he was of Fox Sports talking about Premier Boxing Champions, Al Heyman's company, the PBC, creating an in-house belt for all their weight divisions, doing away with the sanctioning bodies. That's why I think that a lot of this is heading towards that way. Him talking about in-house fights is something that they've been doing for the longest time. I mean, they will let some of their fighters cross the street at times if they're fighters that they're not too hung up on, okay? Other than that, they don't let them. But for me, this is all heading towards the sanctioning bodies becoming obsolete when it comes to the PBC. Why do you think the WBA are so hell-bent on ranking as many PBC fighters as they possibly can? Because they don't want to be binned off by the PBC. They just don't want that. And for the longest time, the WBC were very, very in bed with Premier Boxing Champions for a long time. But they seem to have calmed down a little bit. The WBA have gone over the top. I mean, they're even ranking people like Chris Arreola, for crying out loud. Okay? So that's why I think they're doing it. I think that the WBA are so nervous that the PBC will actually go through with what they were talking about before lockdown about creating their own in-house belt. Because if they did that and they stopped fighting any kind of sanctioning body sanctioned fights such as the WBA, the IBF, the WBC, the WBO and what have you, then they're going to quickly become obsolete because then Matchroom will probably look at doing the same thing. Top Rank will look at doing the same thing as well. That would make the sanctioning bodies obsolete, which in some ways is not a bad idea, but in other ways, you're not going to see the big fights. But you're not going to see the big fights involving the PBC fighters anyway. Why do you think you're not going to be seeing Charlo versus Andre anytime soon? Even though Eddie Hearn Matchroom have offered Demetrius Andrade to go over to the PBC. They still don't want to do it because they're frightened to death that Demetrius Andrade will get the win and take that WBC belt back to the other side of the street. Why do you think you're not seeing Errol Spence Jr. versus Terence Crawford? Why do you think that you're not seeing Tank Davies versus quite a few fighters? Because they're scared to death of the what if. It's all a business. That's all it is. Boxing fans, unfortunately, we don't get to see the best fighting the best, and that's unfortunate, isn't it? Anyway, Floyd Mayweather's statement, he's just confirming what we already knew anyway. Drop your thoughts below, click thumbs up, and of course subscribe, and I'll catch you all in the next video.